So I'll take the question about the relationship. It says here, if you are in a relationship and that person cheats on you, do you guys hear or listen? Okay, so if you are in a relationship and that person cheats on you, can it be because you are not good enough? Just wait. Where is it their weakness? And how do you have to deal with it? Firstly, we have to define what is the relationship, what kind of relationship here, because a relationship could be just a friendship, could be just somebody engagement, it could be wedding. And we have also to be very clear about the word cheats on you, right? Because cheating on somebody in wedding relationship is such a big deal. And cheating in a friendship has a different definition. So we have to define what are we talking about. I will assume that we are talking about just a relationship, somebody likes somebody else, and the cheat here means he could be having another relationship with another person. Is that fair to assume, Yanni?
Yes.
Okay. Number one, when you are in a relationship, you have to define the boundaries of the relationship. Maybe I like somebody, maybe I assume that he or she likes me, and I build in my dream that we are in a relationship, yet there is nothing really. Maybe when I see somebody talking to somebody else, I feel jealous, yet in fact, also there is nothing between that person and the other person. But cheating happens. If you are in a good relationship, strong relationship, and somebody cheats on you, I want to put 3 lines under, is it because you are not good enough? Honestly speaking, you have to link your worth, your value, not on how people treat you, even if that includes cheating. Cheating has nothing to do with you being good or bad. Because even if you are not good enough, again, the solution to that is not to cheat. There is lots of different ways to break a relationship than to cheat. But I want each one of you today to learn that your value, your worth, does not lie at all on how others treat you. I had a lovely chat with, I think, 5 or 6 lovely girls, and I told them one of my mottos since I became a priest is don't let your peace comes out of the other's mouth, which means don't let your inner peace depend on how others treat you. Because others could be also treating you badly because they feel you are a little bit better than them. Or others could be treating you badly because many other things. So not good enough, I want you to delete it from your dictionary. St. Augustine said a lovely thing actually. He said if the world has only one individual who is Augustine, Jesus would have come and be crucified for Augustine. So my value is worth the blood of Christ. So are you good enough? I want to hear yes, because no, again, let me ask you again. Are you good enough? Yes. No, very loud again. Are you good enough? Yes. So delete the word not good enough from your dictionary. Is it because of their weaknesses? For sure, somebody to cheat, it's a weakness. Now, how can you deal with it? How can you deal with it? If it is a legit relationship, you have to talk to the person. Yani if it is engagement, if it is other legit relationship, you have to talk to the individual. You have to tell him or her that what she or he did is not acceptable, that you deserve a little better than that. And usually in a relationship, there is a term called closure. You have to have a closure, all right? Closure with the person. So number one, look at yourself and say to yourself, it's not about me, I'm not the cause. Number two, pick the right atmosphere and talk to the person about it. Number three, involve somebody. If there was, for example, a priest involved in that relationship, involve him. Talk to him. If there was a parent involved in the relationship, involve him. If there was any kind of a third-party individual, you have also to involve him. But you don't just hold it and look at yourself and say, well, I'm not good enough. I hope that this is like the answer, but again, we need to define a relationship and all of that. But
so the question is, what words would we have to summon someone to confession, right? So the idea, when the devil comes in, and this happens often, like, so I have people, for example, at church waiting for confession, and as I'm confessing, or someone's confessing, right? And 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, they're gone. Like, they're afraid, like the devil plays with their mind and they leave, right? So many people are afraid of confession. I'm not sure why the person is afraid. Maybe he doesn't trust the priest, maybe he's afraid of putting himself out there. So I assume it's the second one, because I don't think it's the first one. The second one is actually kind of easy, I would say, because believe it or not, the priest kinda can tell which sins you're doing without you even seeing it. Don't tell me. What I mean by that, let me clarify. So not because we're saints, that's not what I mean. What I mean by that is that what the devil puts in people's minds is that you are such an awful person, right? You are the only one that does this. What would Abuna think of you? How will he look at you? But in reality, based on your age, we can already guess what you're doing approximately, because everybody else your age is exactly the same boat, right? So that feeling of anxiety, that what would I think of you? Abuna feels compassion and knows and is aware very well what happens in this world. And because of this, he's so happy when someone, even living in this crazy, because we live in a crazy world, right? That comes in and is able to offer repentance and wants to unite with God once more, right? And partake of the Eucharist. So I really, really encourage the person, if I guessed properly what was the problem in him approaching a father in confession, is that really you have nothing to worry about. And obviously you know that whatever is said in confession is confidential between God, because He is in our midst in confession, and the priest you confess to, right? And yourself. If I did miss the reason why you're hesitating, please come see me if you want, or send another message saying Abuna Gabriel doesn't understand anything. Yeah.
You said a very quick point. So what happens if a priest were to expose a confession? Like, what can actually happen? Because I hear people saying, no, like they're gonna like strip him of his priesthood and like all these extreme cases, but what actually happens?
Well, I don't know of any case, so I don't know what actually happens. But if ever someone, I don't think anybody would do that, but sometimes between priests, for example, we can discuss things without mentioning names for us to be able to help each other in how to deal, right, and to manage and to guide people. But we never divulge any names or anything like that. So I don't think you need to be worried about that at all, right?
I just have a question. I don't know if this is true or not, but during the confessions, like after confession, are priests, aren't they supposed to just completely forget, like they're supposed to just completely forget about the sin? So if you were to mention the sin, you obviously have the person in the back of your mind because you remember them. Isn't that kind of conflicting?
Are you saying that the priest automatically forgets what you said? Is that
Not
what you're saying?
forget, but they're supposed. I've heard that they're supposed to, like after they've confessed, because God has forgiven the sin, so the priest is like supposed to completely just like he forgets that you did the sin, he forgets what the sin is, like he.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll talk from personal experience, right? So what happens usually is, first of all, we have so much information in there. Okay, that it's very difficult to keep any, right? So you don't have to worry about it. But sometimes, rarely, we remember, and I truly believe that we remember for the sake of the person, right? Because what happens in confession as well is discipleship, right? I truly believe in that. So when I ask or people come confess to me in church, I always give them another one, because I truly believe in discipleship, right? So we want, or the church wants to take that person and wants him or her to become a saint. And that requires us following up the spiritual canon with the sins and the growth, right? So we focus on the sin, we try to remove the sin bit by bit, right? And at the same time increase our spirituality. And for this to happen, God could leave a sin there, but regardless, like the priest has so much compassion for the people because he understands what things are going on, right? It's very, very, very rare that someone will come to a priest and shock him, right? Very rare. That honestly happened to me only once, right? And it's because, like, it was just not normal. It was really abnormal. It's like, like stuff that never happens. You couldn't even imagine, right? Okay. So now that he broke my innocence about that, now nothing will ever shock me ever. But this happens so rarely. Nobody your age will ever shock a priest with this. Like I said, so we can already guess what they are. They're so common. Right? We're all in the same boat, right? So maybe I want to answer.
Well, this is just about that question. So, like, in counseling under certain circumstances, like in counseling under certain circumstances, confidentiality can be broken. Is there any circumstance in which, like, by law or like if someone's in danger, can Abuna like divulge certain information?
The only thing I would say is if there is a case of suicide, right? Unfortunately, many people say, "Oh, I'm going to kill myself." Like it's very common today, unfortunately, because we're so much lying, right? Sorry, but when it's serious, it's serious. Like this is the only reason why the priest could break it.
So not by law.
Actually, by law.
Yeah, actually, just to clarify, the counseling thing, there is limitations to the confidentiality. If there is a harm, as Abuna said, involves whether to you or to others, like if, for example, somebody who's talking about child abuse, counselors are obliged to go and just call the police and all of that. I did a research paper on how the priest could act in such case. And in fact, I came to the conclusion that as priests, we have to still maintain our confidentiality because it's sacramental. Yet, at the end, if the priest requires to do something like this, he will have to end the confession immediately. Take off his hat as a symbol of, I'm no longer a priest in confession right now. And he will have to tell the person that I have to make this, to break the confidentiality. But for Coptic Orthodox priests, because nobody will care about whether you take the hat or not, everybody will remember this is the priest. So in my research paper at the end, I advised the priest to have the person make the call himself. Convince the person to make the call, so that I didn't break the confidentiality, yet I also followed the rules. I maintained the priesthood confidentiality, yet we also made the announcement. That's Yani. Thank you.
Some confession. So my confession, I apologize. There was one more question about confession, but this is about like the sins that we commit. Well, we're like, we're talking about emotions. So when we get angry, frustrated on the road, sorry, everyone. People cuss sometimes when they cut you off. So like I know it's still considered a sin, and it still can deny us from heaven. But there's times where you kind of forget. You committed a sin like that, or you all, is there kind of like a general way to confess it?
Well, let me
you have
give you.
to say every single thing you've ever done before it's gonna be forgiven.
Thank you for this question. What I'll answer you in a different way if possible, because also I find that people come to confession, it's like, okay, what am I going to say now, right? People don't realize that 90% of confession is done prior to confession, right? So what I would suggest, and maybe the fathers can add or correct me, is you actually take some time in prayer, right? And 5 minutes, God revealed to me my sins, right? And you can pray a few psalms, right? And the prayer for repentance and so on. And you need to sit down with yourself, like 10, 15 minutes, and write things down. You know, not in details, but like anger, right? And you will always make sure that you cover these things. And after you have that list in front of you, you need to take a few minutes to offer repentance on them. Because it's not a joke. It's not coming just for fun, right? This is not, right? So I need to offer repentance. It's the sacrament of repentance and confession. And then I'm ready for confession. I step in, Abuna, this. Actually, talking one of the best stories, well, not stories, but experiences I have with someone is this woman, very nice woman. She came to in confession, completely ignored me, completely, didn't even look at me, which was great. And said, God, I am sorry. And then she started going on for something. I'm like, finally someone that understands. Right? God is in our midst, right? And then Abuna just puts the hand, right, and the priesthood of Christ in him, so Christ forgives the sins. Right? But, you know, we're there to make Christ present, but not more than that, right? And for guidance when necessary, as we'll see in a topic tomorrow. But I definitely recommend that, and in that way, you won't forget much.
So my question is, a lot of what we teach, you always walk around with being humble, calm nature, and good behavior. A lot of time people grow up around an environment where, you know, where it's always intense. Nobody's born to be naturally cussing, outraged, or being in bad behavior. It most often is due to the influence of the environment. So how can somebody stay in one state of mind but fixated on God when when the environment around them makes them seem that doing the opposite of God's will is normal?
Do you mean prior to confession, to be able to sit down and think through, or you mean generally?
And I'm speaking in general, how does somebody stay fixated on God and try to avoid behaving sin when the place they live or the environment around them, it seems natural to sin almost every day?
Yeah, I think that's a very different question, but I'll say it quickly, I guess. As possible, right, as much as possible, if you can avoid being in these spaces, right? So if I have a certain place that can really instigate an urge for sin, then as much as possible I need to limit my time there, right? Or be around friends, for example, that won't help me getting into that sin, right? But pulling me out of the sin, right? But I think I'm expecting your question to be a bit more different than that. So if you want, maybe you can do it on one-on-one or ask the fathers, because I don't want to take over the entire time if you don't mind. So we can do one-on-one after, or if you'd like, ask the fathers ahead after. I feel like I'm hugging the mic and I don't like it.
No, your answer is good.
There's one of the questions can come in a simple words.
in simple words, define the humility. One of the questions here. Actually, this one of the most subjects that we ask about how to be humble. And a lot of people, they spend all their lives in order to learn only this virtue. It's not about something that will happen instantly, that I will come at a certain moment of a time and say, I am a humble person. It's a process. Lord Jesus Christ told us in the Bible that, learn from me, from I am humble and a meek person. So it's a learning process. It's not something that I will get only instantly. No. I cannot talk to you now after I'm saying I reach humility. No, I'm in the process. And it's about ups and downs in our lives. In Sirach, chapter number 2, verse number 4 and 5. Accept everything that will happen to you and preserve in your sorrow, and have patience in your humiliation. For gold and silver are tested in fire, yet truly acceptable men are tested in the furnace of humiliation. So it's about running process. I cannot reach a point and saying that I reach the humility and I'm now a humble person. No. God will humble you all the process of your life till the end, in order to keep you humble all the time. To not reach the point that I'm going to say that now, thank God, I'm a humble person. No. I cannot talk to you about humility if I'm not under the process of being humbled all the time in my life. So it's not about a virtue in itself, it's about a way of your life. It's a life. Love is life, humility is life, long suffering is life. It's not only virtues. No. It's a gate to the kingdom of heaven. Love is not only a virtue. Humility is not only a virtue. Yes, it is, but it's also more than that. It's a gate to the kingdom of heaven. And a gate means life, means path, means way. So this is the meaning of it's a simple way in humility. Thank No one will say I am humble, and any humble person really will not get to know that in himself that he's humble. Actually, this is the first place. That he will, every time, saying to himself, I am on the way to my kingdom of heaven. I am on my way. I cannot say at a certain point of time, now I am a humble person. I cannot say it. So sometimes if you feel it, then it's maybe a problem. Because that's why it's related to lecture of today by Buna, that it's all the time you are suffering because you are a child of God. And this is not because of our sins, but because we are child of God. So it's a process. All the time it's a process. And Lord Jesus Christ started with himself in the first place. He started with himself. He didn't request from us anything that he didn't pass through before us. So it's a process. We cannot say at any point of time that we reach humility. Otherwise, we fall in the Yes. Before I pass the... any questions?
We got a question about, it's not written here, but it's a question I think that everybody would benefit from hearing about. We received a question about this idea of how it is that we sometimes send out conflictual messages in regards to suicide in the church. The question that came in spoke first and foremost about this idea of how it is that the church right now is moving towards proclaiming that we totally understand that mental illness is a very serious thing and it cannot be taken lightly. Mental illness is not simply something that a person can tell you, go say a couple of prayers, light a candle, you'll be fine. We're clearly realizing that mental illness more and more, there has to be a lot more awareness around the subject, and that clearly for some people we have to pursue medical intervention, and that's in the process of therapy as well as potentially even medication. So we recognize how serious it is, and we also recognize how it is that many people who suffer from mental illness can also be pushed towards acceptance of the potential of harming themselves through suicide. And yet at the same time, we also read about how it is that the church condemns suicide, and how the church talks about how suicide is in and of itself a very selfish act, an act that is sinful and unacceptable. So how do I reconcile both of these things? I think we have to come to the conclusion that it is not because an act is deemed sinful that the church does not necessarily empathize and understand how a person can be pushed towards accepting that sin. Because what we do declare in the church is that while we were sinners, the Lord Christ came and He still chose to be among us to save us. But let's not get things twisted. It is not because we recognize and empathize with a person that they are pushed towards a very specific sin, that somehow negates the fact that we are accountable for the actions and decisions that we make. So let me give you an example of what I'm trying to say. We know that at the level of biology, there are now genetical research that can demonstrate that a person can be predisposed to something like alcoholism, right? So does this mean that if I do some DNA testing and we discover that because of my ancestors and who I am today and my forefathers and the people who raised me, that somehow through nature and nurture I'm predisposed to alcoholism, that I can have a conversation with God and tell Him, well, Lord, it's very clear that You made me this way, so I'm going to go ahead and get drunk whatever I want, because it's really not my mistake. You're the one who created me like this to be predisposed towards the sin. No. If we were paying attention to the conversation that we were having before, this whole idea of carrying certain crosses are not something that we necessarily deserve, as much as they are things that were placed upon us. And some of us have to carry some very heavy crosses. And some of us, in suffering from mental illness, might be tempted to have certain thoughts of harming ourselves and potentially considering suicide. And if you are undergoing something like this, I strongly urge you, if you are not ready to yet speak to a priest, I urge you to speak to someone that you love. Speak to a family member, speak to a person that you trust, speak to anyone about the fact that you are entertaining these thoughts, and then immediately seek help. You cannot be left alone in a state where you are entertaining these kind of thoughts. But does this mean that if a person does pursue the final action of deciding to commit suicide, that the church has condemned this person to hell? Of course not. Let's make something perfectly clear. Just in the last couple of decades, there was a time when the church said if a person commits suicide, we will not pray a funeral prayer on the person. Did you know that? Does anybody know why? You think by doing that, the church was officially signing the paperwork, send to hell? You think that's what the church was doing? As a matter of fact, this very action of not praying the funeral prayer on a person who committed suicide a few decades ago was more for pastoral reasons for those who would be attending the funeral. It was to send a very clear and direct and powerful message to those who were attendants. This is not an option. We are not the author of our own lives. But at the same time, the church would still remember that person on the altar, would still remember this person and pray for God's mercy. And yet today, now that we are becoming more and more aware of how serious mental illness can be, the church now in the synod is slowly moving towards the conversation of saying, no, if we have any doubt that the person was suffering from any sort of mental illness, we have to pray for them. And we will pray the funeral prayer for that person. And we will ask the Lord to have mercy. We will ask the Lord that the same way, Lord, that you were willing to accept the worst of sinners to be your disciples and your apostles and those who had lost complete and utter despair, and you chose them to be evangelists and establishers of your faith, that you may be able to shine your love and your mercy on these people who have also suffered. So for those of us who might think that we are contradicting ourselves in both of those statements, that's not necessarily true. I urge you to realize that both statements are true. Suicide is a state where we clearly choose to go against God's will. And in that sense, yes, it is sinful. But does it mean the church does not recognize how difficult that is? And how it is that the church urges everyone to come and seek help so that you don't necessarily go down that path? Empathy can exist despite the fact that something is unacceptable. I hope that gives somewhat of an answer, and I understand how sensitive this issue is, but please understand, the church is in the business of speaking the truth in love. We do not believe in political correctness. What is right, and what is truthful has to be spoken in truth, but it has to be spoken in love. It has to be spoken in humility. And the church recognizes that. Yes?
Well, to your statement about if it's discovered that that person suffered from mental illness and that's why they committed the act, how would the fathers decide that? Like what if someone was suffering in silence? They looked great on the outside. Do they still get the prayer? Or is the church sort of leading towards, even if you commit suicide, regardless of mental health or a bad decision or a cry for help that went the wrong way, do you get that prayer? Or is it somebody's call?
So I know that there is a level of scrutiny that is adopted to make sure that we investigate to be able to see whether or not we're going to be praying those prayers. And that could be simply as simple as the person who was the father of confession is asked if they had any doubts in regards to this person suffering. If a person has counseled this person, and it's really not a complicated process. It's not like an interview. If they ask the father of confession clearly, do you have any reason to believe that this person was suffering from anything? If the answer is yes, we pray. It's really that simple. And obviously for dioceses that have bishops, there's very clear guidelines as to how it is that happens. But the church's purpose is to lead people to salvation. The church is not sitting there and saying, no, we're going to begin with the premise that we're not going to pray until proven innocent. That's not it. Yes?
I want to know if a priest ever is made aware or knows of somebody who is suicidal, should the person come up to the priest and ask for guidance and seek help, or will the priest advise the person to seek professional help from a psychologist or a therapist?
Mm-hmm. So, first, let's agree that the human being is psychosomatic. What we mean by that is that you have a mind, you have a body, and you also have your soul and your spirit. The priest, when you are suffering from this kind of this state of being where you no longer want to live, there is very clear spiritual counsel that has to be given to revive hope, to instigate this idea of realizing your value, exactly like Abuna was saying earlier. And there is spiritual guidance and counseling that is required. But at the level where there has to be medical intervention, like at the level where psychiatry has to be introduced, obviously the priest, I don't know why it is today that I think some of us believe that when a person is ordained to become a priest, they get some sort of vaccine where suddenly you become like a scholar, you can become an academic counselor, you are a psychiatrist, you can tell if it's a boy or a girl when a girl is pregnant, all of this crazy stuff, right? No, obviously the priest will remain a person who is responsible for spiritual guidance and living out the mysteries. But he will definitely encourage that person to pursue also any other fields of counseling that are required. Yes?
So this is kind of going off the topic of pain and suffering, but I'm just wondering what the church's official stance is regarding euthanasia, because I think that's a situation where you feel like you are handed a dose of pain and suffering that you cannot tolerate anymore. How does the church deal with that?
Okay. So euthanasia is a very big topic. Not to mention the fact that today there are many people who would distinguish between euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide. And in both cases, we make something very clear. The world today will promote this idea of an honorable death. An honorable death. You have to understand how contrary both of those words are. There is no such thing as a death that is honorable when we are created to be alive. This has to be clear. What we mean by this is that if we truly believe that God is the author of all life, and that we find life in Him, we never try to find different ways of appeasing our decision to pursue comfort for the sake of going against everything that He is as the author of life. When we embrace life, we are embracing the submission to Him. But this is very different from a person who considers palliative care. A person who has no options out there. There is nothing that can be done. And now it's simply an extension of existence. It's not living anymore. There is nothing that can be done medically. The church has no problem with considering palliative care. That is not euthanasia. Versus a person who says, no, I know there are options out there, but I want to die. Let me make the decision. And when that is done, the church says you are taking upon yourself the power to be able to inflict death upon yourself, and that's the equivalent of murder. And that's why the church has a very strong stance on euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide, where a physician is capable of speaking on behalf of this person and saying, I think I know what this person would have wanted, and I'm going to go ahead and administer it. Or in different cases where basically the patient will cock the gun and it's the physician who pulls the trigger, right? Regardless, in all of these situations, there is so much conversation to be had to be able to explain that there's so many exceptions and so many conversations to have. But whenever I am accelerating death for the sake of comfort, that is not honorable in the eyes of God. That is not pursuing life. And in that case, what we are really doing is allowing death to overcome. Yes?
Sorry, what about DNRs?
What about?
DNRs, like do not resuscitate.
DNR?
Like, yeah. Like,
Do not resuscitate.
Yeah, like if you don't.
That's a very good question. I have not done sufficient research to be able to, I don't want to give you a random answer that I don't know. If any of the fathers know anything about this, then please go ahead. But as the little that I do know about it is, again, if a DNR is implicated in a situation where there is no hope, there is no possible medical intervention, the person will remain constantly at the mercy of technology, then at that point it's almost the equivalent of palliative care. Because to be quite honest, today with the technology that we have, we can keep a person alive forever. We can keep a heart beating and lungs pumping forever. But our purpose is not to extend existence. The purpose is to be able to give life.
So what if a person is terminally ill and wants to sign a DNR?
Is there a chance of healing for this person? Let me say it this way. What the church promotes is that if there is any way to pursue life, we should be pursuing. Yes? Yeah,
Oh, okay, sorry. Just to understand about us moving towards like praying for them, does that mean there's a potential opinion that Hades is not the only option for them, there's potential that they can actually go to heaven?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, okay, so you know how you said now we're moving to a way of actually praying for those with mental illness that committed suicide?
Yeah.
Are we still on the stand that they're going straight to Hades, like no matter?
No, that's a very good question. So the question here is, are we of the opinion that people who commit suicide are going straight to hell? Let me be very clear about this, okay? And I never like to be categorical, but I'm about to be categorical, okay? No one, not a patriarch, not a saint, not a prophet, has the right to put himself in the seat of our almighty judge and make the decision of who is going to heaven and hell. We do not know the intricate workings of the heart of the man. And in that case, the church prays for God's mercy because we trust in it, and we pray for God's justice because we trust in it. And we ultimately leave that to God. But nowhere should anyone be speaking on behalf of God and saying that so-and-so is in hell and so-and-so is in heaven. To what extent? To the extent if somebody asks me, a monster of a person like Hitler, where is he? I will tell you I have no clue, but I trust in God's mercy and justice.
I just wanted to comment about the DNR. I'm just going to look at it socioculturally because the technology built up over time where we can pretty much keep them alive for a very long period of time. So I think there is a difference between an active death, which is euthanasia, where they're actively choosing to die, and a passive death where they let it happen, where they let the nature take its course.
Right.
So personally, I don't count that like as a sin if you don't want to be like, if you don't want like mouth to mouth, or if you don't want like them going really invasive, trying to like do surgeries on you or trying to defibrillate. That's totally like up to the person, right? In my opinion.
So at the end of the day, I think it really does come back to the question of, is there a possibility for medical intervention where I can actually have a state of healing? If there is healing that is possible, we urge the person to pursue it because we embrace life. But if healing is not possible and all we're really doing is temporarily reviving the person only to relive what they're doing, at that point it becomes a very difficult decision to make. But yes, sometimes it's worth letting the person go and letting God make the decision. Yes?
So I understand if there's a chance for healing, you should let it, I guess, happen. But what if you're, in Canada we're fortunate enough to have free healthcare, but what if you can't afford to keep that person hooked up to all these machines for a very long time? Because I know that I guess it gets pretty costly.
So I think at the end of the day we have to come to the realization that if we don't even have the means to be able to help this person, then again, that's literally what it means to let nature take its course, right? If I've already sold the clothes off of my back to try to help this person, and at the end of the day, they're still greeted by the Lord as they pass, then so be it. God is not going to sit there and say, no, I knew you still had a laptop that you could sell to pay for an extra treatment. No. That's not the God that we believe in. Yes. Can you speak up? I'm sorry. Very, very good question. So what about those situations where we hear about those people who actively pursued? So again, forget the 49 martyrs of Shaheed. Let's go back just a couple of years and talk about those 21 martyrs of Libya. Right? They could have easily just said an empty statement of, sure, we'll believe whatever you want to believe for the sake of pursuing life. But here's the thing. Life to us is not simply a state where you breathe and can see and can hear and your body continues to exist. Life for us is a person. I am the way, the truth, and the... Those people chose life. Those people chose life. So in that sense, that death is the only death that we can possibly consider to be honorable. But when you and I die of our... So, forgive me for being so drastic, but if I decide to smoke for 35 years and then I get lung cancer and then I die, I can't say, oh, what can I do? That's my cross I have to carry. No. At this point, it's self-inflicted. As you can see, I'm clearly not as fit as some of my other fathers up here, right? So if I start to develop, it's coming, I'm pretty sure, but if I start to develop illnesses and fatigue and my body slowly starts to suffer because of everything I've inflicted on myself, because I love McDonald's, then I can't sit there and argue and say, well, it's God's will. No, God's will wasn't that I drive through every single... So, I want you to know that there's no catalog, right? There's no, the priests don't have an app that you can simply check off certain boxes and then the app tells you, let him die or push him to live, right? But that would be pretty awesome. But that doesn't exist. Every single case has to be treated with the intricate details of that person's life, that person's situation. If we go back to the example that our sister was referencing before, this idea of what if there are means, but I don't have the means, right? All of these things have to be taken into consideration. But as much as possible, the premise by which the church always works is that we pursue life at any cost, right? But the church does make a distinction between life and simply prolonging existence, where life has no meaning at this point. Can we take one last question on this, and then I'll pass it over to Father Anthony? Yes.
Like, suppose you have a friend or a group of friends that like suffer from some sort of mental illness, you know that like they have like, let's say, depression or something. Like, do you advise, like, how do you advise to help them, or do you not advise that like if you know if like a certain individual has a mental illness, like we shouldn't like be too involved like with them, or like how do you advise that we help? And especially if they don't go to the church.
Well, as at the most basic level, I mean, Christianity is summarized as love God and love your neighbor, right? I absolutely have to love my neighbor, but not at the expense of me who's already drowning, trying to help this person swim. And this is where it's really important to know yourself, and tomorrow we're going to be talking about this. This whole idea, if I know that I already have difficulty swimming, I'm not going to tell Father Anthony Paul, hey, jump on board. That'll be a disaster. I'm going to drown and I'm going to take him with me. And this is not what's right. But if I do have it in me to be able to love this person, and please understand what I'm saying. Many of us think that our responsibility is to counsel each other. Believe me when I tell you this. You might think that what you're saying sounds nice, but at the wrong time, to the wrong person, you might do more damage than good. You are called to love this person. Not necessarily to start asking yourself, what would a sophisticated counselor answer this person? And then I tell this person, you know what? Eat good, go to the gym, read a good book, everything will be fine. Those words can be devastating. Devastating. And if anything, you might have pushed this person further away. So sometimes what we really need to do for those who are suffering around us is to love them. To let them know that we're praying for them. To make ourselves available to them. But again, not at the expense of potentially putting ourselves at risk.
Now you finally get the answers. You don't have to fiddle that thing anymore.
I'll do a short one before answering a real one. Someone asked if I'm affected by the new rules from the Synod. No.
That's
because I'm above it.
New rules for monks now. New rules for monks.
But because the Brotherhood hasn't been formally recognized as a monastic community, so the canons haven't been applied to it. I suck at replying anyway, so it wouldn't have made a difference to most people. But one of the questions is, as Christians in today's world, how should we respond appropriately to the scrutiny and hate that Christianity receives from others, whether it's in the media or through the words of others? That's a great question. The short answer is, please stop being stupid. Because I really think the hate for Christianity is because Christians have been stupid. And so is that Christians have been ignorant. And I'm not saying ignorant from a secular perspective, because when culture calls us ignorant, they tend to mean something else. But I mean us being ignorant about our own faith. Okay? And so we present something wrong, and we say things that aren't true, or we proclaim things that aren't true, or what have you. So you need to learn the gospel, first of all. And I really wonder how many Christians know what the gospel is. Right? Like if you were to be asked, hey, what is the gospel? I don't know that many Christians know the answer to that question. And that's not good. So one, do you know the gospel? Do you know what are the claims of Christianity? Do you know your faith? Right? Because how are you going to respond, even if it's not by talking, if you don't know? Okay? Because I feel like we need to learn how to think critically. How many of you believe in global warming? Raise your hand.
Scared. Yeah.
I was living in California. How many of you, keep your hand up if you have read an actual scientific journal publication about global warming? Okay. Keep your hand, or lower your hand if it was because school made you. So that's impressive, okay? So there's about 7, maybe, okay? So my point is, I believe in global warming, okay? But my point is that society goes around making really bold claims that they're expecting everybody to accept, and often you don't even know why you're accepting it, right? Like I felt this challenge living in the States when everybody was up in arms against the current president, right? Which was to try and be objective, right? Is that rather than jumping on the bandwagon and just being like, oh, that's obviously ridiculous. We use very like exaggerated terms of clearly this, obviously that, most definitely this, and it's just like, why is it so obvious, right? Like, I don't know why global warming is obvious. What does it even mean? Does global warming just mean it got hotter? Okay, I think it did. Okay, but does it mean it got hotter specifically because of this list of substances? I don't know anymore, right? So, but what we're doing is hearing a lot of people speak, and that's not necessarily wrong, okay? But we're not thinking critically, right? And so people are doing the same thing about your faith. So people think that you believe certain things, and so they're critical of those things. Sometimes they're right in terms of what they think you believe, and sometimes they're completely wrong. But if you don't know what you believe and why, then you'll have absolutely no idea how to respond, and you'll feel embarrassed, right? That somebody would come up and say, oh wow, I can't believe that you think X, Y, and Z, right? And if you don't even know that, you're like, oh man, do I believe X, Y, and Z? And then, oh my goodness, why do I believe in X, Y, and Z? I suck, right? Whereas maybe you don't, maybe they do, okay? But you need to learn how to think critically and to know what it is that we're claiming, okay? Because often somebody's accusing us of something. If we can keep the mother down a bit, my bad, I just get distracted. Often we get bogged down by how we think people are going to perceive us. Okay, so if you know your faith, one, know your faith, two, have some critical thinking, and three, have confidence, right? And don't bow to random things that make no sense. So for example, it'll be like, I'm afraid to say my opinion because you're gonna think I'm judging them. That sounds so dumb to me, okay? Because let's say I have a friend at work who's like, I'm gonna go out for my weed break. Does my not going out to smoke weed mean, oh my goodness, they're judging me because they didn't join me in having weed, right? Like, what does that even mean, right? That for me to not judge means to do what everyone is doing, okay? That's ridiculous, okay? We hopefully wouldn't need to feel the need to do that to make everybody feel comfortable about what it is. But if you know the claims of Christianity, you'll be in a really good place. Because Christianity's got a lot of good things going for it, as far as how compelling it is as a faith. And if you don't know that, then you should find it out. Because then you will know whether something, for example, Da Vinci Code, when that came out, like the world went nuts. So it was like, oh my goodness, this one does Christianity. And then you read it and it's like, this is really lame. Like these are old claims, first of all, like they're not new. Some of them were pure fiction, right? But for example, in the book, he's got this account of the Council of Nicaea, right? Where all these old men are like folding up their galabeyas, which he doesn't even recognize they're wearing. And they're like having like an actual all-out war. And he describes it in that way. And I was like, well, actually the documents really don't point towards that at all, right? Where we have remnants of the minutes of this meeting, okay? There were witnesses there, they wrote things down. That's not really how it went down at all, okay? But if you don't have knowledge, you walk away being like, oh my goodness, did you realize that they decided Jesus was God in the year 325 because they had a big brawl in Nicaea, right? Like, that's how it's gonna come off. If you don't know anything, then it's like, oh man, I can't believe I'm in this faith. But if you know something, right, then it's just like, oh, but that's not even how it happened, right? Or for example, there are some questions about evolution maybe we can get to after. When somebody makes a claim, and let's say, I say, well actually maybe one of the approaches to the text was insert X. Someone like, oh, you're just saying that out of convenience, right? Because we challenged you. But if you know your history, you'd be like, actually no, the fathers were saying that in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th century, right? That this isn't something new. When you know your stuff, you're going to be confident because you know why you believe it. So make sure you know.
So what if, especially during this day and age, you as a Christian are tested or challenged because of your beliefs in certain things that are
So first of all is that if they hate us for what's right, so be it, right? Blessed are you persecuted for specifically righteousness' sake. But second is to also know why I have that stance, right? So for example, do I as an Orthodox Christian think that a gay person is a bad person? Of course I do not, right? So what I do believe as an Orthodox Christian is that God designed creation, regardless of what his mode of creation was, that there is an objective right and wrong, okay? And so anything that falls short of right is by definition going to be called wrong. So if we, for example, as a society, like one example, like predisposition, we know that people are born with some kind of predisposition towards addiction, right? So we don't as a society say, well, in your case, addiction is great. You should pursue it, right? We're going to encourage you and we're going to buy you all the stuff you need, and we're going to support you in that. We say, it sucks to be you, and we mean it, not sarcastically, right? That you did have a biological aspect to this. Here are the supports that we're going to make for you. Here's the research we're going to do for you, and you need to fight too, okay? So if I'm saying the same thing with homosexuality, which I am, okay, and then I'm saying, oh, here's a bad person because there's a predisposition here, I'm saying that I believe there is such thing as an objective right to sexuality, right? Which is going to come down to an issue of why do you believe in God? Because that is the issue. Because if I don't believe in a God, then there's no right or wrong definition to sexuality. So of course we're going to disagree, right? It's going to be an obvious one. So if they're mad that I believe in God, they're like, well then ask me why I believe in God. They'll just decide that I'm a moron, right? Ask me why. If they really want to be as critical in their thinking or as open-minded as they claim to be, right? Of saying, why do I believe this? So it really has to come down to, do I believe in the claim of who Jesus Christ says he is? Because that's where I'm making these decisions from, is that I actually believe there is such thing as an objective right and wrong, and I stand on very confident ground on why I believe this claim, right? And that's what I'm saying, we need to become more rational. We lived in a generation where everybody did have faith, so faith was taken for granted in terms of you didn't need to question so much, right? That's why to many of our parents, it's scandalous, right? When we're just like, how come, why, who said that? And they're like, this is silly, right? This is like, but this generation is saying, think critically. So I'm saying, yes, think critically about everything, right? Don't direct it in one way. And so if I come to a confident standing of, why do I believe that Jesus is who he says he is? It becomes much more compelling because it becomes more factual to me, right? It is no longer theoretical, right? It's just like, well, because there is a thing that was designed, right? Like it becomes an obvious thing. So we can do that with humility, right? And so like it doesn't have to be in your face of like I'm gonna knock you out, right? But it can still be done with the tone of saying, I'm not embarrassed that I believe this. And that's the tone that I really wish that we would, like I was a pharmacist, right? So for example, I intentionally chose not to dispense planning. That was my personal decision, okay? Because one of the modes of it, not the only mode, has some abortifacient implications, okay? So my personal life decision was not to. So my staff knew that, right? So I intentionally removed it and I was having it in a way that it wouldn't auto-replenish. And when they would look at me like, oh wow, you're judgmental. And I was like, why am I being judgmental by having a stance on how I feel about life, right? This person made a decision, that's their decision. I'm not discussing their decision. I'm not talking about their morality. I'm not talking about their righteousness. I'm not talking about what they should have thought about. I'm simply saying you're asking me to participate in something in which I do not personally want to participate. Why does that offend you? Right? So if you believe in freedom, why are you angry that I don't subscribe to your view? Right? And bring it back there to say that this is typically what's happening, is that people are angry that you disagree while claiming that we can agree to disagree. But it's just not always authentic. Your question.
So lately there's I've kind of run into it a few times where people kind of associate, or I don't know if associate is the right word, but they say evolution kind of has some truth with it, to it. Like for example, when like people say when God said let there be light, that it would be the Big Bang, for example. So I just
touch it briefly and hand to Winner Gabriel because it's his specialty. Very, very briefly. He literally wrote a thesis on it. Is that I'm putting them on blast. Briefly, is that the church does not make scientific proclamations. Okay? The church is not in the business of declaring science to be a fact or fiction because that's not the role of the church. Okay? Is that I can't, for example, let's say we've proven the earth is round. I can't say, well, actually, I theologically disagree with you. It's either round or it is not. Okay? It's a matter of fact. Okay? So we don't have a place as Christians to come in and say, I decided that I disagree with your theory because of my religious belief. Right? Is that we've got to understand that science is asking the question of how, religion is asking the question of why. Okay? And so what we believe is that God created the world. In what mechanism that he did, we don't know. And there are things that change within the scientific community over time. And so the real question to ask is not, is this allowed or is this not allowed? Is this theory okay? Is not? It's a question of, is there any contradiction here between what God revealed to us, okay, and what is being said here? And if so, we need to confront and ask why, right? Is to say, what is it that we're clearly not understanding, because there can't be a discrepancy, right? And so the whys are what we're concerned with, and the how is something else. But it wouldn't probably have more informed.
Okay, so for logistics and timing, we will conclude, but I will ask the fathers to allow me to answer 4 questions quickly. No, actually, it's more of. So the first one is, whose video was better, Calgary or Winnipeg? To be honest. So I want a big shout out for the Calgary video. Just I want to hear a big shout out for Calgary video. I want a very, very, very big shout out for Winnipeg video. Does Kiki love me? Can Kiki please speak to your friend and just...
What have we done?
Quick one, it's called Athanasius. Love you guys. I can speak on myself. I don't know you, but that's okay. I love you too, حبيبي. Okay, last one عشان نخلص وبعدين نبتدي البراyer. Can all of us give Sarah Michael a big shout, and all the servants actually who did this, just a big shout to all the servants. We'll start the compliant prayer. There will be question and answer privately. And tomorrow I think we have a very long on-roof question and answer session as well. Okay, so we'll hold the questions. We'll continue tomorrow so that we can follow our schedule.